Russians have a reputation for struggling with English pronunciation. But as it turns out, us native speakers of English are also struggling with Russian pronunciation, and we don't even realize it a lot of the time. And this is especially true when it comes to male Russian names. Let's look at a few. Vladimir. Now, I know what you're thinking. Vladimir's a pretty easy word to pronounce. What could I possibly be doing wrong? Well, the truth is,
you're saying it wrong.
And there's three things you're doing wrong. The first is that when you see an A in a Russian name, you pronounce it as A. It's very natural. But it turns out there is no A sound in Russian. It's actually pronounced Ah, like ah. I'm pronouncing it wrong. Ah. So it's not Vladimir, it's Vladimir. The second thing you're doing wrong is that when you see the letter I in a Russian name, you think it might be pronounced I, like we use it in English. But in fact, Russians don't have that sound either. When you see an I in a Russian name, it's pronounced E. E. So it's not Vladimir, it's Vladimir. Vladimir. The third thing you're doing wrong is where you're putting the stress. Now, it turns out that in Russian, stress is really important, even more so than in English. If you put the stress on the wrong syllable, it sounds ridiculous to Russian ears. And most of the time we do. We put it on the first syllable, Vladimir, or on the last syllable, Vladimir. Both are wrong. In fact, the stress is on the middle syllable. It's Vladimir. Vladimir. Like this guy, Vladimir Putin. Vladimir. Next up, let's take the popular Russian name that we generally pronounce as Ivan. Now, we know straight away that that I isn't going to be pronounced I, because we just learned that an I in a Russian name is pronounced E. So let's start by saying Ivan. Now, we know that's also wrong because that A isn't going to be an sound. It's going to be an. So let's try saying Ivan. And the third thing, like in Vladimir, is that the stress is in the wrong place. In English we say Ivan, putting the stress on the first syllable, but in Russian it's actually on the second syllable. Ivan. Ivan. Like this guy, Ivan the Terrible. And in fact, terrible is a really bad, terrible translation of the Russian word Grozny. It would be better to say Ivan the strict or threatening or very scary dude. So what about this one? Well, straight away you know that that I is not going to be I, it's going to be E. And we'll start by saying Igor. It kind of sounds alright. But it turns out the stress is on the first syllable again. Igor. Now, Russian has another interesting pronunciation rule, which is that when there's an O in a Russian word which doesn't have the stress, it actually turns into the sound ah. It loses all its onus. And so, in this case, it's not Igor, it's Igor. Igor. Bet you didn't expect it to pronounce that way. Now, let's apply that same rule to this word, what we usually pronounce as Boris. Now, it's not going to be Boris, firstly because you know that I is not going to be is, it's going to be is, Boris. But also, the stress is not on the O, it's actually on the second syllable, on the is. And so, the O actually turns into an A when you pronounce it, and you say Boris, 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 Boris. Like this guy, Boris Yeltsin. Finally, to really drive the point home about stress in Russian words, let's look at this name. Now, it could be pronounced one of three ways. The stress could be on the first syllable, and it could be Gregory, Gregory. Or it could be on the second one, Grigori, Grigori. Or it could be on the third syllable and be Gregory, Gregory. Turns out it's on the second syllable. It's Grigori. Like this guy, Grigory Rasputin. That's all for now. I hope you go out into the world pronouncing Russian names a little bit better now that you know how to pronounce them properly.